I've been painting water for some time, but I got really interested in water when I started seeing these enormous tanker trucks rolling by my house, or at the bottom of the hill near my house, filled with a very mysterious substance, and I didn't know where that came from, and I needed to do some investigating. And I found out that these tanker trucks were filled with leachate, and leachate is the water that percolates through a landfill, and the leachate was coming from our local landfill, and it had to be pumped out of the landfill to the rate of 2 tanker trucks per day over to the wastewater treatment facility. So I got really interested in the landfill, and I did a video about the landfill, but my local landfill, our largest collectively constructed entity. And one of the problems with the landfill was the water that was not only having to be pumped out of the landfill because it was toxic, it had toxic components in it, but also because our local landfill was unlined and some of the water was seeping out into the groundwater underneath my house. So there's the origins of my sort of very palpable, very close to home interest in water issues. Well, I've made videos about dredging operations near my home. I've made videos about plumbing and agricultural infrastructure in the Imperial Valley and the Mexicali Valley in Southern California and northern Mexico. I've made videos about wastewater infrastructure in Tijuana, Mexico. I've made a video about the Klamath River watershed and the controversial dams on it. Oh gosh, I could go on and on. There's a lot of projects that have related to water in my practice. Mostly it's through the paper, and just reading the paper, and there's this website called Aquafornia that has this exhaustive compendium of journalistic pieces about water issues in California. And these journalists are working in very obscure places like Trinity County or Imperial County or Butte County, and digging up all this really interesting information about water politics on a local scale. And I use that as a principal resource for finding out about particular water issues. And also I read academic journals and follow the footnotes from one water crisis or one water event to the next. And following the trajectory of water too has been really interesting for me. Going from watershed to watershed, just tracing the pathway and the trajectory of the way the water flows helps me to find individual projects for what I do. Mark Reisner's book, Cadillac Desert, is a real important compendium of water issues and the history of water politics in the West. That's always a great resource for me too. So. I've just always been besotted by formal beauty. I find it extremely seductive. I just have this desire to make my work look beautiful, even though I'm dealing with fairly complicated subjects. It certainly complicates my subjects further that they are so seductively lovely, and that's part of the paradox and part of the interest that I have for my work. So yeah, I've always been attracted to formal elegance, formal beauty. It's a persuasive device in my art. A lot of artists are that way. I'm not the only one. Well, yeah, the Center for Land Use Interpretation has been a big influence of mine. They're very important for me in that they deal with so many different environmental and infrastructural and cultural issues all across the United States. They're just such a great resource and a source of inspiration, partly for their sort of study neutrality about the issues. They don't really take a polemical stance about a particular issue, and I enjoy that and appreciate that. And I try to do the same thing in many ways. I'm not, I have an issue, I have a political issue about whatever I do. I have a particular idea that I want to, personally, that I'm involved in and think about, but I'm not necessarily conveying that stance in a very strident or very obvious way to my viewers. The other source of inspiration for me is certainly journalism. Investigative journalism is. I've been a news junkie for many years, and that's a huge impetus to make art and to visualize these journalistic practices. think, number one, there has been, and I'm not an expert on this subject, but I've read enough to know that there are enormous federal subsidies to agribusiness, and it's hugely problematic for the environment. It's hugely problematic for culture and social justice issues. So that's something that we really need to look at seriously as on the federal level. The heavily subsidized agribusiness practices all over the country and how deleterious it is to the environment. So that's probably my biggest beef vis-a-vis water issues in the United States. Oh gosh. Well, right now, every site I examine is very exciting to me. But right now, the Westlands Water District, which is the largest and most politically powerful water district in the United States, it's located in Fresno and Kings County in the western San Joaquin Valley. That's the place that my mind is at now, and it's this extraordinarily forbidding, foreboding, windswept, horrifying, beautiful, traumatic place. So whatever I'm studying, I think, at the moment is the place that most interests me. So I think it's Westlands Water District right now, because that's where my current project is.